We had a very exciting week, ladies and gentlemen, where we had a ton of high-scoring players, but same time, we have some brutal injuries that we are going to have to discuss. I'm not going to waste your time. Let's go Denver. Let's go KC. With Denver, the biggest thing is Javonte Williams turns into a workhorse. Now, this was not something that we had seen previously. Previously, had seen Javonte in a three-man running back by committee with both Samaje Perine and Jaleel, where we are saying that nobody was interesting at all here. Well, Javonte has 27 carries and 3 receptions. So now Javonte, if he's going to have this type of work, he has to be a must-start running back. Now with the receivers, yes, Judy and Sutton both get there with the receiving touchdowns. You possibly have one of these guys getting dealt, so I don't want to be super excited about playing these guys going forward. Really hope we get a trade either tomorrow or the following day. Now on the Chiefs side of things, obviously everything fell apart. Great matchup against Denver. I was excited to play Isaiah Pacheco everywhere we could. In reality, nothing really happens. I mean, this overall Chiefs offense fails. Maybe you want to blame it on Mahomes dealing with an illness. I don't know. In reality, it's a road division game. Any given Sunday, we know that sometimes you are going to have games just like this. I'm not going to take too much away from this Kansas City Chiefs game. You still had Pacheco seeing everything in this backfield. You still had Rashee Rice as the wide receiver one on this team. And you still had Kelsey dominating targets. Now, dropping down to our next team, we'll go with the New England Patriots as our next team. Now, Kendrick Bourne did see an injury. So, Demario Douglas actually out there leading the team in snaps and Demario Douglas leading the team in targets. In reality, nobody's interesting in New England. If you were desperate and you really had to start someone in this offense, the only guy you would even look at is Ramondre Stevenson. He had 4 targets this week. He had 2 receptions, 11 receiving yards, and 39 carries. But you're looking at a running back by committee in one of the worst offenses in the NFL with inefficient RBs. None of the receivers are exciting. The tight ends aren't exciting anymore. I mean, if you're looking at what we have with Hunter Henry, 31 out of 53 snaps. It's a tight end by committee. Don't play anybody in New England. Now, going over to the Dolphins side of things, obviously, we know Waddle, we know Tyreek. They're stars. You start them every single week. I hope you listen to us and bought low on Jalen Waddle. Don't want to waste your time talking about that. The main thing that will be important is going to be looking at the running back usage. You had 13 carries for Raheem Mostert. You had 5 to Jeff Wilson. You had 2 for Salvin Ahmad. And if you're looking at the snaps, Raheem Mostert plays 43 out of 77 snaps. It is turning a little bit more into a committee. Now, in reality, you can say, well, Mason, it was a blowout, right? Can we be looking at the snap data here? And could we really be taking this going forward? I would say probably, because, I mean, the one concern that you have is the Miami Dolphins are very good. They're going to go out there and they're going to win a lot of these football games by double digits. And what do the snaps look like, especially as you get Devon Achane back in here? If it's a 3-man by committee, these running backs still can be viable given how good the offense is, just probably not as good as they were earlier this season. Now, going over to the Jets game, the grossest game of the week, as I think most people are assuming. Breece Hall gives you absolutely nothing as a rusher. Breece Hall gets you 12 carries, 17 rushing yards. But as a receiver, the man gets there. He has 9 targets, 6 receptions, 76 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. The 3-down back, I mean, you have a little bit of Michael Carter. I mean, Dalvin Cook plays 8 snaps. In reality, Breece Hall seeing everything in this backfield. You start Garrett Wilson just because he's so damn good. He can overcome a bad offense. I just can't stop thinking about what this team would be with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson if we had actual good quarterback play here. Now, going over to the Giants side of things, you had Tyrod Taylor getting injured. Now, Tommy DeVito coming in, giving you 7 pass attempts for -1 passing yard. Yes, a whopping -1 passing yard stat line. You had 7 total passing yards. 7 passing yards for the New York Giants. And you had 36 carries, 128 rushing attempts for Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley plays 67 snaps. I just think it's funny, right? They spend all offseason saying, oh, yeah, no, running backs don't matter. Come on, Saquon, I know the running back market. We don't need to pay you crap. And typically, I am on the side saying, oh, yeah, no, running backs don't matter. We don't need to pay these guys. And then you go out and see something like this and go, okay, well, truly, do we need to reevaluate? Do we need to say the running backs, at least in this instance, definitely make a difference? Now, like we said, Tyrod Taylor dealing with a rib injury. Darren Waller dealing with an injured hamstring. The real concern is this team's playing for nothing. They're playing for 2024 picks. So if you're looking at an injury-prone, older tight end like Darren Waller, what's the incentive for him to get rushed back in? Now, going over to the Jags game, y'all know we were actually saying Travis Etienne, my third most drafted running back this year, the player that I am printing money with in underdog drafts, would have been a sell-high guy if you could pivot over to another running back inside our top 5 rankings. We were saying that Etienne was a top 5 running back for us rest of season, but if you could go get someone like Austin Eckler in a full PPR league, if you could go get someone like Tony Pollard that's in that similar range, it makes sense because they are already through their bye weeks. Well, Travis Etienne goes out there, completely crushes. Etienne has 27 total touches. He has almost 150 total yards and the receiving touchdown. Still inefficient as a rusher, still only 3.3 yards per carry. The Jags offense, still not great. But I mean, ultimately, if you're looking at the percentage of snaps that he's going to get, I mean, we'll show you this PFF graph. Just to let you know, all this snap data, all these graphs are going to be coming from PFF. You see that Etienne is that true bell cow back. Still probably stand by if we can go get someone like Austin Eckler in a full PPR league. We would, because he's already through his bye and we're going to get the extra game at this time of the year. That matters so damn much. Now, I am saying that before the Chargers game. So if Eckler goes out there and gets injured, please understand why I sound stupid. Now, outside of that, if we're looking at Ridley, if we're looking at Kirk, if we're looking at Evan Ingram, I mean, Calvin Ridley sees 10 targets. I don't think we can be super excited about any of these players. You have Ridley, Kirk as low end wide receiver 2s, and then you have Evan Ingram as the tight end 5 rest of season. Now, going over to the Steelers game, as we were talking about at the very top end, you do have a Kenny Pickett injury that we are going to have to be monitoring, ladies and gentlemen. You have Mitchell Trubisky coming back in. Overall, horrendous team. Nothing to get too excited about with the rushers. We know they're splitting it damn near 50-50. You had 35 snaps for Najee, 33 snaps for Jaylen Warren. They are handcuffed backs. If Jaylen Warren goes down, Najee's exciting. If Najee goes down, Jaylen Warren's exciting. Can't start them if they're both fully healthy. They're not good enough. And then look at the receivers. Deontay Johnson does dominate with targets. Y'all know we were talking about selling high on George Pickens based on Deontay coming back in this offense and the perceived target share. Deontay, 14 targets in comparison to George Pickens at 5. Pickens saves himself with the receiving touchdown. I do think you have to project out Deontay Johnson to be the wide receiver 1 going forward. Now going over to Atlanta. Desmond Ridder is taken out of the game. Finally, we have Taylor Heineke coming in. I don't want to say Heineke is a great quarterback. I don't know if it can get that much worse than Desmond Ridder. You have Bijan Robinson getting there with the rushing touchdown. Bijan Robinson, that true bell cow back, sees 50 out of 68 snaps. The frustrating thing is you have Bijan seeing 5 targets out of the backfield and just doing nothing with them. I mean, if he had the 3 receptions for 30 receiving yards in that full BBR format, you'd have been ecstatic about his day. It's just tough when he doesn't convert any of those targets. And then Drake London is injured, but ultimately none of the receivers, none of the pass catchers here are interesting. Like we talked about coming into this week, you only start Bijan Robinson. That's probably still going to be the case going forward. Now going over to Tennessee, we are saying coming into the week that Will Levis, a quarterback that we interviewed on the red carpet of the NFL draft, was the player that I was rooting the most for. He was the nicest guy ever, gave me the nicest interview, made himself look a little bit foolish for my favor, had no reason to do it on his end. I mean, I love Will Levis for that. And I'm going to probably order a Will Levis jersey right now, to be honest with you. I did not think he was going to be good, however. We were saying bench DeAndre Hopkins, bench all the wide receivers. The only guy you play here is Derrick Henry, is why I'm rooting for Will Levis, why I really want this guy to do well. In reality, it probably ain't happening. No, Will Levis does great. Will Levis looks better than Tannehill ever did, just chunking the ball. He has 29 passing attempts, 4 passing touchdowns, 0 INTs. DeAndre Hopkins gets there, only 4 receptions, but when 75% of your receptions are touchdowns, you're going to have yourself a day. And then on top of that, you have Derrick Henry operating as the 3-down bell cow. You have Derrick Henry going out there seeing 44 snaps and seeing 22 carries in comparison to Tajay Spears at 3. Now, before the game, they were coming out and saying that Derrick Henry would not get traded. We will make sure that we continue to monitor that, see if that is actually true. But let's pull up our next team here. And as I do that, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you wanted to go out there and check out any of those pick'ems that you have on Monday night for Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the live chat, in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. Plus, on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, a Jared Goff special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, and a Flock exclusive special pick'em on top of that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, more than less than half a total yard. A quick side note, my favorite pick'em for Monday night is actually going to be Jahmyr Gibbs to have fewer than 100.5 total yards. While Jahmyr Gibbs, must-start player, phenomenal matchup, great situation. I mean, to see this type of projection, it is absurd. Literally, the only running back that was this high this week in Underdog Pick'ems was Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you had guys like Travis Etienne only sitting there at 94. Now, let's go over to our next team, which will be the Houston Texans. And I was all in on starting Nico Collins. I thought Stroud was going to have a great game based off what we saw before the bye. Well, nope, did not happen. CJ Stroud does not do that well. You only have 140 passing yards in this offense. I mean, if you're looking at the rushers here, they do go out there and they, disappoint. You have Pierce, you have Singletary split in the backfield. Pierce plays 25 snaps. Singletary plays 23. You have Mike Boone getting involved as well. The Texans and these running backs are not good enough to be viable in a three-man running back by committee to start. So none of the Texans running backs are startable. And maybe we need to reevaluate our call on starting Nico Collins just automatically without thinking about it. He does get to 6 targets. He does lead the team in targets, but it is a pretty tough call. Now, going over to the Carolina side, Bryce Young has the best game of his NFL career. In reality, that's not going to be the primary takeaway here. The primary takeaway instead is going to be just that Chuba Hubbard is the guy. Okay, do not play Miles Sanders. We didn't know who it was going to be between the two. I wasn't starting either guy this week. I just kind of wanted to see what was going to happen. But yeah, Miles Sanders was a full participant all week at practice. Does absolutely nothing. You have 45 snaps for Chuba Hubbard. Comparison only 12 with Miles Sanders. And Adam Thielen still dominates targets here. Now, going over to the Cowboys game, y'all know we were buying low on Tony Pollard for a multitude of different reasons. We were saying the Dallas Cowboys offense was going to be better than they have been. We were saying that Pollard was a running back averaging 16 carries per game, averaging 5 receptions per game, and already through his bye. Well, the Dallas Cowboys offense was better, but yeah, none of that went to Tony Pollard. All of it went to the receivers here. You had CeeDee Lamb with multiple receiving touchdowns, 14 targets, 158 receiving yards. Thank God for our best ball teams. But yeah, going forward, I mean, I think that we can say this Dallas Cowboys offense, probably not a top 3 offense in the NFL, but definitely a whole lot better than people were perceiving them to be this week. And then, yeah, Dak Prescott, I want to say, probably a locked and loaded top 10 quarterback rest of season. None of the receivers here are interesting for me. It's only going to be CeeDee Lamb. Like, Lamb had 14 out of 34 targets. If you wanted to start Jake Ferguson, you go for it. And then Pollard still is the 3-down back. Obviously, this game is just a little bit of an outlier. I still do think that we're going to be starting Tony Pollard every single week and projecting him out to be a top 10 RB. And that's coming from someone who drafted 0 Tony Pollard this offseason. I think he's going to be better, though. Now, going over to the Rams side of things, Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman split the backfield damn near 50-50. I mean, hell, if you had them in a good matchup, if the Rams were able to effectively move the ball down the field, you'd be excited to go out there and play him. But Royce Freeman gets the rushing touchdown. Darrell Henderson actually leads the team in receiving. The main thing here is the wide receivers do nothing. Puka gets you 3 receptions. Cooper Kupp gets you 4 receptions. I mean, he has 10 targets, which was close. We went through, took the fewer than 12 targets with Cooper Kupp this week on Underdog, but got fewer than, but came damn near close to 12. Now, going over to the Vikings RIP, ladies and gentlemen. We were coming out last week saying, oh my gosh, maybe Jefferson actually rushes himself back. I mean, we know a month ago, it looked like the Vikings were playing for nothing. Then they win a couple games like, okay, they're going to rush Jefferson back to get in here and compete. You have a devastating injury. Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles. Cousins out the rest of the season. Now I don't know what to say. Obviously, Addison has himself a day. Hawkinson has himself a day. But I don't want to say nobody's startable. I think that Jordan Addison falls down to being a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. He falls down to like the Chris Godwin range. TJ Hawkinson is still a must-start tight end. He's not an elite level option like we previously said. So it's a tough spot to be in for the Vikings, especially if you're a Jefferson owner, because one, Jefferson is now no longer incentivized to rush himself back. This team's playing for nothing. And two, when he does come back, he's going to come back to a lower efficiency offense overall. I know there are a lot of people who hate Kirk Cousins, and I agree, maybe from a real life perspective, you're never winning a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. But Cousins, from a fantasy football perspective, is phenomenal for the players in his offense, particularly the pass catchers, and losing out on Cousins will dramatically impact what we have for everybody in Minnesota. Now, going over to the Green Bay side of things, Aaron Jones, I guess, is slightly expanding his role, right? I mean, you have Aaron Jones coming out. He has 5 targets out of the backfield, which is kind of nice, but still does absolutely nothing. I mean, A.J. Dillon still sees 36 snaps compared to Aaron Jones at 34. So we're going to reiterate, Jones not startable until we see otherwise. And then if you look at what we have with Christian Watson, Watson dominates in targets. With Watson's 8 targets, he doesn't really do anything. Which kind of sucks. I mean, nobody here in Green Bay looks like you're too excited about him. Now, going over to the New Orleans side of things, I mean, right when you think Kamara is about to have himself a day, he has the receiving touchdown early on. You have Taysom Hill coming out, vulturing the rushing touchdowns. Taysom Hill gives you 2 rushing touchdowns. And it's a tough spot going forward because what we were previously saying is I was previously going, okay, in a non-PPR format, you start Taysom Hill because non-PPR league, the only thing that matters is touchdown upside. Full PPR league, I am not starting Taysom just because we don't have the guaranteed target volume, and typically the floor is going to be a little bit lower, and I'll be a little more nervous. Does that change here? Probably not. I could be wrong. But I still probably don't want to start Taysom, and he's still probably just a thorn in our side. I know obviously everybody's going to rush to go out there and start Taysom Hill, and if you have him in an underdog best ball draft, congrats, really, really happy for you. It's just kind of hard for me to get it here. And then Shaheed, great for you in your underdog best ball drafts, 153 receiving yards in the receiving touchdown. He only had 3 targets. You're not starting Shaheed in fantasy next week. Michael Thomas, you're not starting. Olave continues to dominate with targets. Last week he had 14. This week he has 9. And Olave continues to be very inefficient with these targets and does pretty much nothing. Gets you, about 10 fantasy points this week. Thanks for nothing. So I don't think much changes. Now going over to the Colts side of things. I just love printed money with Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, and Jonathan Taylor. 3 of my top 10 most drafted players on Underdog this year. Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, my 2nd and 3rd most drafted wide receivers. Thank you, God. Thank you. We get 13 targets for Michael Pittman Jr., 9 targets for Josh Downs. Both of these players continue to be must-start options going forward. Jonathan Taylor does see more snaps than Zach Moss. A little bit frustrating that while Taylor has the 43 snaps compared to Zach Moss at 28, while Jonathan Taylor is the more efficient running back to Zach Moss we've already seen, you still have Zach Moss, the guy that actually gets the rushing touchdown. It's frustrating. You're still starting Taylor every single week. And Zach Moss is more so that low-end running back too, that if you're desperate, you can play him. But he more so just has that premium handcuff appeal where if you were to have a Taylor injury, he is a league winner. Now going over to the Eagles game, Jalen Hurts has himself a day. A.J. Brown, obviously always a stud. But Devonta Smith was a must-start wide receiver for us based off the matchup. We knew that he was also a buy low guy. We were believing the volume's there. The offense is elite, and I still think he's a great talent. The reason we loved him this week is because the matchup against Washington. Devonta Smith has himself 7 receptions, 99 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. Now, is Devonta Smith a dramatically different player than he was this morning? No, they're the same guy, right? It's just that sometimes you're naturally going to find that wide receiver volatility. That's what allowed us to buy low on A.J. Brown after the first few weeks. So it allowed you to buy low on Devonta Smith last week. When you have top options in an offense, they will be volatile, but as long as they are young, we believe that they still have the talent. They are phenomenal buy low candidates when they do nothing for about a month. DeAndre Swift sees everything as a 3-9 back. Nothing changes. You still start Swift. You still start A.J. Brown. Still start Smith. Still start Goddard. Still start Jalen Hurts. You want as many players in Philadelphia as you can get. Now, going over to the Washington side, Sam Howell, almost 400 passing yards, hits you up with the 4 passing touchdowns on top of it. Now, Terry McLaurin looked like he was going to blow up at the start of the day. McLaurin ends up not doing as much as you would assume when there's 400 passing yards in this offense. McLaurin gets you 5 receptions, 63 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. You have the Curtis Samuel injury. The frustrating thing of this offense is everything is so spread out. While you want to say, come on, Mason, man. Terry McLaurin had 12 targets. John Dotson had 10 targets. Still, there were 51 passing attempts in this offense. You had 7 targets for Crowder, 8 targets for Logan Thomas, 5 for Gibson, 4 for Samuel, 2 for Brian Robinson. Ultimately, this offense will be much worse going forward. And if they are spreading it out all over the field, it is difficult to go out there and get excited about any one given name because they're probably not going to get an alpha target share. Now, going over to the Cleveland game, not too much to discuss. Obviously, PJ Walker, not great. I mean, you did have Jerome Ford playing, but it was a 3-man split backfield, so don't really want to be too excited about any of those guys. Amari does dominate with targets. Amari has 11 targets out of 33 passing attempts. That's beautiful, but he can't be too excited about Amari when we have PJ Walker and a quarterback. David Njoku gets there for our best ball teams. Thank God. Njoku's had 2 great back-to-back weeks. Hopefully this continues. And then going over on the Seattle end of things, I mean, Metcalf, 14 targets, which is honestly a real surprise. Typically, we do not see this kind of volume with DK Metcalf. JSN gets the receiving touchdown. Happy to see it, but in reality, can't start JSN going forward. He only had 4 targets here. Really, all we're going to be doing is starting Metcalf, Kenneth Walker, and then if you needed that wide receiver too, we'd be going Tyler Lockett. I still want to be rostering JSN, though, for that long-term upside. I believe he may continue to expand his role and give us what we want in the fantasy football playoffs. Now, going over to the Ravens-Cardinals game. You had the Ravens in a great matchup against the Cardinals. You have Gus Edwards hearing in the rumorville, hearing down the grapevine. Oh, Derrick Henry's getting shipped here? People think that they need Derrick Henry? No, how about we force feed these guys 3 rushing touchdowns after dominating Detroit last week? Yeah, Gus Edwards does great. Actually has some receiving usage as well. You only have 4 carries for Justice Hill. If you're going over and looking at what we have with Justice Hill as a receiver, you got 4 targets. So still kind of a split where you have Gus Edwards as the first and second down back, Justice Hill more so as the receiving option. But still, nonetheless, I think that in plus matchups, Gus Edwards will be a running back they need to start until further notice. And then honestly, nothing else to talk about here. Zay Flowers doesn't have himself a great day, but does lead the team in targets with 7. You're still probably starting Zay Flowers. Now, on the Cardinals side of things, we are getting word that you will have Kyler Murray missing this next week as well. So I guess we're going to get at least one more week with Joshua Dobbs. I mean, Kyler Murray was fully at practice this week. Don't know what's up, but of course I'm an idiot. But DeMercado gets everything in this backfield. It was a running back we were looking to start this week, just given the guaranteed volume. Here he has 78 rushing yards. He gets you the 20 rushing attempts. I mean, only 1 reception of the backfield, which is a little bit frustrating, but with this kind of volume, you probably have to start him, even if it's a horrendous offense. But Trey McBride is the story here. The waiver wire pickup from last week. You have no Zach Ertz. Trey McBride gets you 14 targets, leads the team. He has 10 receptions, 95 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. Last year, before the NFL draft, everybody was viewing Trey McBride as the top tight end in that rookie class. We know that tight ends typically take a little bit longer to come on. So honestly, I don't think this should be too much of a surprise, and I'm buying into the story. I think that Trey McBride will be a must-start tight end for us next week. Now, going over to the Bengals game, we had T. Higgins, sadly, not fully healthy. We are wanting to monitor what the situation, what the snaps are going to look like before we started them. You had T. Higgins playing 42 snaps out of a potential 63. Now, I think we can assume as we get 1 week further removed from the rib injury, T. Higgins will be healthier. Higgins still did get you about 12 fantasy points today, but obviously Chase takes all the volume here. Joe Mixon, still the 3-down back. Burrow looks great, and I think we'd assume, I don't want to say he's fully healthy, but he's getting damn close. In this Cincinnati offense, we should project as an elite level 1 going forward. And then going over to the 49ers side of things, I guess having no Deebo Samuel is really negatively going to impact Brock Purdy. I think maybe we underestimated what the difference with and without Deebo Samuel would be here with this team. Brock Purdy struggles yet again. But Kittle dominates volume. Ayuk dominates volume, as you should expect with no Deebo Samuel. Now, with that being said, as Deebo Samuel comes back in, I think that these will be sell-high candidates, because then we will have that difference-making player taking a considerable amount of volume. And we will outline this again on our sell-high video. But if you look at the splits with and without Deebo Samuel for George Kittle, they are striking. But I think that's all we have for y'all in this. If you have not done so already, please go down there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to tail us on that Jahmyr Gibbs pick'em, less than 100.5 total yards, you can find that on Underdog Fantasy. Link in the description, link in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK. You're also going to get a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, a Jared Goff special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard, and an Amon-Ra St. Brown special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard on top of it. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out in a live stream tomorrow night.